Family, let me say this straight from the start. When God says don't be, he is not trying to deny you. He is trying to deliver you. We often hear God's don't as rejection, punishment, or restriction. But heaven hears it as protection, preparation, and positioning. You see, God's don't usually shows up right before a turnaround. When God says don't go there, it's because he already knows what's waiting there. When he says don't touch that, it's because he sees the damage before it ever reaches your hands. When he says don't touch that, it's because he sees the damage before it ever reaches your hands. When he says don't move yet, it's because timing matters just as much as obedience. Some of us are frustrated because things didn't work out. But what if they didn't work out because God was working something better in? What you thought was a closed door was actually a divine detour. What felt like a delay was God setting up a display of his power. What sounded like no was really God saying, not like that, because I'm about to turn this around. The enemy wants you to believe God's don't means the end of the story. But God's don't often means, watch what I'm about to do next. If you stay obedient when it doesn't make sense, if you trust him when the path is unclear, if you stop forcing doors God has shut, you will discover this truth. God doesn't block your path to harm you. He redirects it to bless you. So don't resent the don't. Don't rush the process. Don't quit in the middle. Don't rush the process. Don't quit in the middle, no what? Because the same God who said don't is the same God who says I'm turning it around. When God says don't, our first reaction is often to assume he is trying to take something away from us. We hear it as limitation, restriction, or punishment, but God's don't is never about reducing your life. It is about preserving it. What sounds like restraint on earth is often rescue in heaven. God sees the whole picture while we are usually focused on the moment in front of us. His warning is not emotional, impulsive, or reactive. It is informed by perfect knowledge and eternal perspective. Protection is most valuable when you don't yet recognize the danger. A child doesn't understand why a parent says, don't touch that stove, because all they see is a smooth surface. The parent sees heat, pain, and damage. In the same way, God's don't shows up when we lack the ability to fully grasp the consequences of a choice. He knows what a relationship will cost you before it ever starts. He knows what that shortcut will steal from your character. He knows how that decision will ripple through your future. His warning is proof that he is paying attention to where you are headed. Punishment comes after failure. Protection comes before it. God's don't is preventative, not reactive. He is not waiting for you to mess up so he can discipline you. He steps in ahead of time because he cares too much to let you walk blindly into destruction. Many of the wounds people carry are not because God failed to warn them, but because they ignored the warning. The tragedy is not that God said don't, but that we convinced ourselves we knew better. Sometimes God's don't feels heavy because it goes against our desires. We want what looks good, feels good, or promises immediate satisfaction. Protection rarely feels exciting in the moment. It feels inconvenient. It feels like delay. It feels like missed opportunity. But what we call missed opportunity, God calls avoided disaster. What we call loss, God calls mercy. You may never know how much pain you were spared simply because you obeyed a warning you didn't fully understand at the time. God's protection is also an expression of his covenant love. He is invested in your future, not just your present comfort. He guards your purpose even when you are unaware of it. When he says don't, he is defending something valuable inside you, your calling, your peace, your integrity, your destiny. The enemy is not after small things. He is after what God has placed on your life. God's warning is a line of defense drawn before the attack becomes visible. We often interpret God's silence as approval and his boundaries as opposition. But boundaries are proof of ownership. God sets limits because you belong to him. He knows what environments will weaken you and what influences will pull you off course. His protection is strategic. He blocks certain paths, not because they are bad for everyone, but because they are dangerous for you. What someone else survives may destroy you, and God is not obligated to explain why he customizes his warnings. There are moments when obedience feels costly. Saying no to what God says don't may cost you popularity, relationships, money, or comfort. But disobedience always costs more in the long run. Protection does not eliminate struggle. It minimizes unnecessary damage. God is not promising a painless life. He is promising a preserved one. He allows trials, but he blocks traps. He permits testing, but he prevents destruction. The challenge is trusting God's character when we don't understand his commands. If you believe God is good, then his don't must also be good. If you believe he is wise, then his restraint must be intentional. Faith is not only trusting God when he says go, but also trusting him when he says stop. Maturity is learning to value safety over speed and obedience over impulse. When you reframe God's don't as protection, it changes how you respond. Instead of resisting, you listen. Instead of arguing, you pause. Instead of forcing doors, you wait. You begin to see his warning not as rejection, but as care. And often with time and clarity, you look back and realize that the very thing you wanted would have broken you. God didn't say don't to hurt you. He said it to keep you whole. Delay has a way of stirring frustration, doubt, and even fear. When things don't move according to our expectations, we often assume something has gone wrong. We interpret the pause as rejection, the waiting as failure, and the silence as God changing his mind. But delay is not denial. Delay is often the space where God is doing his deepest work that cannot be rushed without consequences. We live in a culture that celebrates speed. Faster results, quicker answers, immediate gratification. Waiting feels unnatural and uncomfortable. Yet God has never been bound by human timelines. He operates according to purpose, not pressure. When he delays something, it is not because he forgot about you, and it is not because he lacks the power to act. It is because timing is as critical as the outcome. A blessing released too early can become a burden instead of a benefit. Delay often exposes what we truly trust. When the answer doesn't come quickly, impatience begins to speak. We start exploring alternatives God never approved. We push doors that require God's permission, but not our force. In the waiting motive surface, do we want God's will or do we just want relief? Delay is God's way of refining desire so that what we pursue aligns with what he intends. There are seasons when God delays not because the promise is wrong, but because we are not ready. Capacity matters, character matters. Character matters. Wisdom matters. God is not just preparing the blessing. He is preparing the person who will carry it. Without preparation, success can collapse you. Influence can expose you. Influence can expose you. Increase can magnify immaturity. Delay is God's mercy at work, protecting you from being elevated beyond your readiness. Waiting also develops spiritual endurance. Faith that has never been tested by time is fragile. When God allows delay, he strengthens your ability to trust him without constant reassurance. He teaches you to rely on his word rather than visible evidence. The longer the wait, the deeper the roots of faith must grow. What feels like inactivity on the surface is often growth happening beneath the soil. Delay reorders priorities. When things slow down, distractions lose their power. Waiting forces reflection. It invites prayer. It creates space for alignment. Many people discover God more clearly in the delay than they ever did in the fulfillment. The pause becomes a place of intimacy where dependence replaces self-sufficiency. God uses delay to shift focus from the gift to the giver. There are also delays caused by factors beyond our control. Other people's choices, spiritual opposition, or complex circumstances can slow progress. But delay does not cancel destiny. What God has ordained cannot be undone by temporary resistance. Delay may change the route, but it does not change the destination. God is able to redeem time, accelerate seasons, and restore what appears to be lost. Sometimes delay feels personal, as though God has singled you out, but delay is not evidence of divine neglect. It is often proof of divine intention. God delays things he values. He guards outcomes that matter. Cheap thigh. GAGs come quickly. Lasting things take time. What arrives too easily is often lost just as fast. In delay, God teaches obedience without immediate reward. He trains you to keep showing up even when progress is invisible. This kind of faith is not driven by emotion or convenience. It is anchored in trust. Delayed obedience is still obedience, and obedience in waiting is as powerful as obedience in action. What we call too late is rarely late in God's economy. He specializes in arriving at the exact moment when his glory is most clearly displayed. Delay sets the stage for undeniable impact. When the breakthrough finally comes, it is clear that it could not have been achieved by human effort alone. The waiting removes confusion about the source of the blessing. Delay is not wasted time. It is intentional time. God is aligning circumstances, shaping hearts, closing wrong doors and opening the right ones. While you wait, he works. While you trust, he arranges. While you endure, he prepares. Delay does not mean God has said no. It often means he is making sure that when he says yes, nothing is missing. Obedience is the bridge between God's promises and their fulfillment. It is the channel through which his power flows into our lives. Many people struggle with the concept of obedience because it often requires faith over feelings, action over convenience, and surrender over self-will. Yet the truth is that breakthroughs rarely come through human effort alone. They come through alignment with God's will, and alignment is achieved through obedience. Obedience unlocks the turnaround because it demonstrates trust, cultivates readiness, and positions us to receive what God has already prepared. Trust is the foundation of obedience. When God gives a command, it is often contrary to what we naturally want to do or what seems logical to our human understanding. Our instincts instant. Hey, tell us one thing. Our desires pull us in another direction. But obedience requires believing that God knows best. It requires believing that his timing, his methods, and his wisdom are perfect. This trust is not passive. It is active faith that chooses to follow even when the path is unclear, even when the outcome is uncertain. Every step taken in obedience is a vote of confidence in God's character, and it establishes a rhythm of faith that prepares the heart for the turnaround he promises. Obedience also cultivates readiness. God often waits until we are prepared to receive what he has planned. Our hearts, our minds, and our circumstances must be in alignment with his purpose for his plan to manifest fully. When we obey, we are not simply following instructions. We are being shaped into vessels capable of handling the blessing without being consumed by it. Consider how a seed must be placed in soil and watered before it can sprout. The soil represents our obedience, our willingness to be positioned according to God's plan, and the watering represents his spirit nurturing us along the way. Without obedience, the blessing may exist, but we will not be ready to receive it in a way that produces lasting fruit. Obedience positions us in the exact place where God's power can be revealed. There is often a precise moment and location where his intervention is most effective. Moving ahead of God or ignoring his instructions can place us out of position, delaying the breakthrough or even causing unnecessary hardship. The path of obedience ensures that we are exactly where we need to be when God acts. Timing and alignment are crucial. Obedience aligns our steps with his, creating a stage where his glory is unmistakable. It is in obedience that the miraculous intersects with the natural, and ordinary circumstances are transformed into extraordinary results. Obedience also strengthens our faith through action. Faith is not simply intellectual assent to God's promises. It is demonstrated through choices that reflect trust in his word. Every time we choose to obey, We reinforce our belief that God is faithful, that his ways are higher than ours, and that his plans are for our good. This creates a cycle of trust and confidence. The more we obey, the more we see his faithfulness. And the more we see his faithfulness, the easier it becomes to obey the next time. This cycle nurtures spiritual maturity and builds the resilience needed to navigate delays, challenges, and opposition without losing hope. Obedience does not guarantee an immediate outcome, but it guarantees alignment with God's purposes. It is not the speed of results that matters, but the positioning of the heart. A life lived in obedience becomes a fertile ground for God's turnarounds. When we act according to his instruction, we are actively participating in the unfolding of his plan. Our obedience releases divine favor and opens doors that human effort alone cannot open. The smallest act of faith-filled obedience can trigger a chain reaction that leads to transformation beyond our imagination. Many people miss the power of obedience because they focus only on the visible results. They want the blessing without the discipline, the turnaround without the preparation. But God's promises are always tied to his instructions. Ignoring his guidance may bring temporary satisfaction, but it will not produce the lasting results he intends. True breakthroughs are the fruit of a life consistently aligned with God's will. A life that responds to his don't with trust, his timing with patience, and his directives with action. Ultimately, obedience is not about limitation. It is about liberation. It frees us from the consequences of our own impulsive decisions and positions us for a natural work of God in our lives. It transforms don't into do in God's timing, turning potential setbacks into launching pads for his glory. The very act of obedience becomes the mechanism by which God turns things around, demonstrating that when we yield to him, we are never left in the place of limitation, but are always lifted into the realm of his provision, protection, and purpose. Closed doors are never arbitrary. When God shuts a door in your life, it is not to frustrate you, to punish you, or to deny you your desires. Rather, it is a strategic move rooted in his perfect knowledge of your life, your purpose, and the circumstances that surround you. Many times we interpret closed doors as rejection or failure, and we grieve over what we cannot access. We look at the doors that remain open for others and wonder why ours are closed, questioning whether God sees, cares, or even remembers us. The truth is that closed doors often protect us from paths that would have led to destruction or detours that would have delayed our destiny. What appears as a denial is actually divine direction, a rerouting that ensures we arrive at the right place at the right time. Divine detours are often necessary because God's plans are always bigger than ours. We cannot see the full scope of what he is orchestrating, and we often lack the perspective to understand why certain paths are blocked. A door closed in our faces may be a redirection toward opportunities, relationships, or experiences we never would have considered, but which are critical for our growth, for our ultimate success. God sees the end from the beginning. He knows the challenges, pitfalls, and distractions that await us, and he intervenes before we walk into unnecessary pain or compromise. Closed doors are his way of saying, not this way, but trust me, there is a better way ahead. Detours require patience, care, use, and flexibility. They call us to relinquish our plans and surrender to God's timing and wisdom. Often the detour may feel inconvenient, uncomfortable, or even unfair. We may have envisioned a certain outcome, a certain path, a certain speed at which things would happen, and yet God interrupts our expectations. Detours test our willingness to submit to his guidance. They test whether our faith is in his plans or simply in our own understanding. But when we embrace the detour, we position ourselves to encounter blessings, people, or opportunities that would not have been available on the original path. Closed doors also serve as a form of protection. The world is full of traps disguised as opportunities. Without God's intervention, we might rush into decisions, partnerships, or environments that could derail our purpose or compromise our integrity. What we perceive as delay, rejection, or loss may actually be a shield, keeping us from harm, disappointment, or destruction. The detour preserves our life, our reputation, our relationships, and ultimately our destiny. Sometimes we do not recognize the wisdom of the detour until years later, when we can look back and see how every closed door led us exactly where we were supposed to be. The spiritual principle of closed doors is also a lesson in discernment. Not every opportunity is meant for us, even if it seems attractive, timely, or lucrative. God closes doors that could take us off course and opens doors that align with our calling and character. Obedience to his direction requires discernment to know when to persist and when to pivot. Not every door that is closed requires frustration or fear. Some simply require trust and patience. Some simply require trust and patience. Understanding this principle allows us to focus on the paths God is opening rather than wasting energy on doors he has shut. The doors can be transformative. They often teach lessons, build resilience, and cultivate maturity that would not have developed on the original path. By walking through the path God sets before us, even if unexpected or unfamiliar, we grow stronger, wiser, and more prepared for the ultimate destiny he has prepared. Closed doors do not mean the end of the journey. They mean a refinement of the journey. God uses detours to stretch our faith, expand our vision, and prepare our hearts for a level of blessing, influence, and fulfillment that could not be achieved any other way. Faith is required when facing closed doors. It is easy to give up, become discouraged, or take matters into our own hands. But trusting God's timing and direction transforms uncertainty into opportunity. Faith allows us to see beyond the immediate barrier and recognize the divine hand orchestrating the path. The detour becomes not a source of frustration, but a source of hope, a chance to align with God's perfect plan, and an invitation to experience his provision in ways we could not have imagined. Ultimately, closed doors are never wasted time or empty spaces. They are markers of divine care, guidance, and strategic intervention. They are God's way of leading us to better opportunities, protecting us from harm, and shaping us for the fulfillment of his purposes. What may appear as delay, rejection, or limitation is often his method of positioning us for a turnaround that exceeds our expectations. Every detour carries the potential to redirect us toward greater blessing, deeper understanding, and a life aligned with the destiny God has designed. Those who trust his guidance will find that the very doors that seemed closed were simply stepping stones to the open doors he had waiting all along. God specializes in turnarounds. He is not limited by human failure, circumstances, or time. What looks like a defeat, a setback, or a dead end in our lives is of 10, the very place where God prepares to demonstrate his power, his faithfulness, and his glory. Human understanding measures by appearance, convenience, and timing, but God measures by purpose, provision, and promise. When we face situations that seem impossible to change, we must remember that the God who spoke the universe into existence is more than capable of reversing our circumstances. His turnarounds are not random. They are deliberate, intentional, and perfectly timed to bring about maximum impact. The beauty of God's turnaround is that it often comes when we least expect it. It does not always follow the sequence we anticipate, and it rarely mirrors the methods we would have chosen. The delay, the closed doors, the don't instructions, all of these are preparatory steps in the turnaround process. God's timing is impeccable. He orchestrates every detail so that the result is not only a resolution, but a demonstration of his power. This is why patience, faith, and obedience are essential. While we wait, God is not inactive. He is working behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, preparing people, and setting the stage for the reversal that will leave no doubt about his hand at work. Turnarounds reveal God's creativity. Human solutions are limited by experience, resources, and knowledge. God's solutions transcend all of that. He can bring life from death, restoration from ruin, and joy from despair. He can take a mistake and transform it into a testimony. What the enemy intended for harm, God can use for good. This principle is central to understanding his turnarounds. The greater the setback, the more profound the display of his glory when he intervenes. Every reversal is an opportunity for God to show that nothing is impossible with him and that his plans are higher than our plans. Faith plays a critical role in experiencing God's turnaround. We must belie. That change is possible. Even when evidence suggests otherwise, trusting God in the middle of difficulty is not easy, but it is essential. Turnarounds are often delayed because faith must be strengthened, patience must be cultivated, and hearts must be prepared to recognize God's intervention when it occurs. Every step of trust, obedience, and perseverance positions us to receive the reversal God intends. When we cling to his word, refuse to give in to despair, and continue to act according to his guidance, we are aligning ourselves with the process that leads to a miraculous turnarounds. God's turnarounds often involve restoration. What has been lost, broken, or stolen can be returned in ways far greater than we imagined. Relationships can be healed, opportunities can be restored, and dreams can be fulfilled with more depth and impact than before. Restoration is not simply a return to the previous state. It is an upgrade. God does not merely fix what was broken. He transforms it into something stronger, more enduring, and more aligned with his purposes. This is why patience and trust are so vital during the waiting period. The process may feel long, but the outcome is worth every moment of delay. Turnarounds also demonstrate God's sovereignty over every situation. No power in heaven or on earth can thwart his plan. Obstacles, opposition, and challenges may appear overwhelming, but they are never beyond his control. In fact, challenges often set the stage for the most dramatic turnarounds. When God moves in a situation that seems hopeless, the impact is undeniable. Turnarounds highlight that the source of change is not human effort, but divine intervention. They remind us that even in our weakness, God is strong and able to accomplish what we cannot. The process of a turnaround can also refine character and strengthen faith. During the period leading up to the Rev, God often works in our hearts to cultivate humility, patience, endurance, and gratitude. We learn to rely on him rather than ourselves. We discover that our perspective is limited, but his vision is infinite. We recognize that setbacks are not punishment, but preparation, and difficulties are not defeat, but the proving ground for his power. When the turnaround comes, we are not only blessed externally, but also transformed internally, equipped to handle the blessing with wisdom and maturity. Finally, God's turnarounds inspire hope and testimony. They serve as living proof of his faithfulness and power. Our stories of reversal encourage others who face similar struggles, demonstrating that no situation is too far gone for God to intervene. Every turnaround becomes a beacon of hope, a testimony that God is actively involved in the lives of those who trust him, and a reminder that the don'ts, the delays, and the closed doors were all part of a larger plan designed to produce glory, growth, and blessing. In every area of life, God can take what seems lost, broken, or impossible and create something new, powerful, and lasting. His specialty is transformation. His skill is reversal. And his purpose is always to turn circumstances in a way that glorifies him, strengthens his people, and fulfills his promises. Those who believe, obey, and wait in faith will always witness his hand at work, because God's turnarounds are not just solutions. They are demonstrations of his infinite power and unwavering love. Trusting God requires more than hope. It demands surrender, persistence, and confidence in his character, even when circumstances seem overwhelming. Many people claim to trust God when everything is going well, when blessings are obvious, or when life is moving in their favor. But true trust is forged in the storms, in the moments when answers are delayed, when doors forward remain closed, and when the weight of uncertainty presses heavily on the heart. Trusting God through every storm means acknowledging that he is in control, even when we cannot see the path ahead. It requires believing that his wisdom surpasses ours, that his timing is perfect, and that his purposes are greater than our temporary discomfort. Trust begins with the recognition of God's sovereignty. We must understand that nothing catches him off guard and nothing is beyond his authority. When difficulties arise, it is not because God has abandoned us or because he is unaware of our struggles. Instead, the storm is often a stage for God to demonstrate his power, faithfulness, and protection. Recognizing his sovereignty provides a foundation for calm in the chaos. It allows us to stand firm, knowing that the situation, no matter how turbulent, is under his control. We may not understand the reasons behind the trials, but we can rest in the certainty that God does. Faith and trust are closely intertwined. Faith is the belief in God's promises. Trust is the confidence that he will fulfill them. The storm tests our faith by challenging our perspective and patience. It is easy to believe God's promises when conditions are favorable, but trusting him when everything seems to oppose us is where true spiritual maturity is developed. Every storm offers an opportunity to exercise trust, to act in obedience, to speak hope, and to maintain integrity even when outcomes are uncertain. Each moment of faithful endurance strengthens the foundation of trust, preparing us for greater victories ahead. Trusting God also requires surrender. Surrender is letting go of our desire to control outcomes, timing, or methods. It is releasing our grip on what we think is best and yielding to God's plan. Many times, people struggle in storms because they insist on directing their own steps or trying to manipulate circumstances. Surrender is not passivity. It is active cooperation with God's will. It is choosing to follow his instructions, even when it seems counterintuitive, inconvenient, or uncomfortable. Surrender allows God to work freely, orchestrating events in ways that human effort alone cannot achieve. Perseverance is another critical element in trusting God. Storms are not always brief. Some last longer than we anticipated, and others challenge us repeatedly. It is in these prolonged seasons that trust is tested and refined. Perseverance involves resisting discouragement, continuing in prayer, maintaining integrity, and refusing to give up despite setbacks. Every step of persistence sends a message to God that our trust is not conditional, that we believe in his power and his promises regardless of immediate evidence. Perseverance also positions us to experience the breakthrough that God has prepared, often when we least expect it. Trusting God through storms requires perspective. The human eye sees only the present and perceives challenges as permanent or insurmountable. God's perspective encompasses past, present, and future, and his understanding of outcomes is infinite. He sees the bigger picture, the lessons, the preparation, and the eventual victory that will emerge from the trial. When we adopt this perspective, storms are no longer merely obstacles. They become opportunities for growth, refinement, and demonstration of God's faithfulness. Trusting God means looking beyond the immediate difficulty and focusing on the eternal plan he is executing. Obedience during storms amplifies trust. Acting in accordance with God's word, even when fear or uncertainty tempts us to act otherwise, reinforces our confidence in his guidance. Obedience positions us to receive God's protection, provision, and direction. It demonstrates that our trust is not superficial or situational, but grounded in our relationship with him. Every choice to follow God faithfully during adversity reinforces the principle that his plans cannot be thwarted and that his timing is impeccable. Trusting God also transforms our emotional response to storms. Instead of succumbing to fear, anxiety, or despair, trust cultivates peace, patience, and hope. It reminds us that we are not alone, that the creator of the universe is fighting on our behalf, and that no circumstance can separate us from his presence or his purposes. Trust is a spiritual anchor that keeps the soul steady even when external conditions are turbulent. It shifts our focus from what we cannot control to the one who controls all things. Finally, trusting God through every storm produces testimony. Every challenge we endure with faith becomes a story of God's power and faithfulness. Our perseverance, obedience, and reliance on Him serve as examples to others, encouraging them to trust Him in their own storms. The turnaround, the provision, or the deliverance that follows becomes evidence that God is not only aware, but actively involved, capable of transforming adversity into blessing and turning trials into triumphs. True trust is cultivated in the crucible of difficulty. It is displayed in obedience when the outcome is unclear, in patience when the delay is long, and in faith when circumstances seem impossible. Trusting God through every storm is not merely a spiritual exercise. It is a lifestyle of reliance on His sovereignty, wisdom, and love. It assures us that no matter how fierce the storm, no matter how deep the valley, and no matter how uncertain the path, God remains faithful. His purposes remain unshakable, and His power is always sufficient to bring about the turnaround He has promised. Breakthroughs often seem impossible until they happen. Many people face seasons where obstacles feel insurmountable, doors remain closed, and hopes appear deferred. During these times, it is easy to become discouraged, to question whether God is truly working, or to believe that circumstances define the limits of what is possible. Yet the reality is that God's power is not limited by human understanding, timing, or logic. He specializes in turning impossibilities into testimonies, despair into joy, and setbacks into launching pads for success. The key to experiencing this kind of turnaround is unwavering trust, persistent faith, and a willingness to align every step with His purpose. One of the first steps toward a breakthrough is understanding that difficulty does not equal defeat. Human perception is limited. We see only what is visible and measure outcomes by immediate results. God, however, sees the full spectrum of time and possibilities. He knows the unseen factors, the hidden alignments, and the divine strategies that are being positioned even while we wait. When a situation seems hopeless, it is often the very moment God is orchestrating the conditions necessary for a supernatural reversal. Our role is to maintain faith, obedience, and patience while He does what we cannot do. Breakthroughs often require a shift in perspective. The same problem that seems like a barrier may also be a catalyst for growth, wisdom, or preparation. Trials are not accidental. They are carefully calibrated by God to refine character, strengthen resolve, and build resilience. When people encounter hardship, they are often tempted to rush, force outcomes, or take matters into their own hands. However, acting outside of God's guidance can delay or even nullify the breakthrough. Faithful endurance, on the other hand, positions us to receive the solution at the precise moment when it will have the maximum impact. Preparation is another essential component. God's breakthroughs are rarely random. They are deliberate and intentional. He prepares circumstances, people, and resources so that when the moment arrives, everything aligns perfectly. The delay we experience is not wasted time. It is incubation, is not wasted time. It is incubation. During this period, God is developing our capacity to handle the blessing, shaping our understanding, and orchestrating opportunities that we might not even recognize yet.
When the breakthrough comes, it is evident that it is more than coincidence. It is divine intervention. Faith must be active during the waiting period.
Faith is not simply believing that God exists. It is trusting His promises, acting on His word, and refusing to yield to doubt or fear. Each act of obedience, each choice to continue praying, each decision to maintain integrity under pressure strengthens our readiness for the
I'll be all right. You don't have to stay. If you've already chosen, I won't stand in your way. I can feel it in your distance, in the way you barely speak, like your heart is somewhere else now, somewhere I can't reach. I was trying just to hold us while you slowly slipped away. Now I'm left with all the silence you didn't want to say. Maybe I just held on to something already gone. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. We don't need to fake the feeling, I can see it in your eyes. There's no reason left for staying when the love already died. Through the quiet in your voice, I can hear your choice. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. I don't need a reason why, I can see it in goodbye. And it breaks me, yeah, it does, but I won't ask you to stay. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. I'll be all right.